Hello, good morning. Another thought for the day. Families. It's often thought, and I say thought, in general terms, most Filipino families are pretty close. When I say they're close, they often live in compounds where their uncles and aunts, cousins, all live nearby. And therefore, you would say they're close. They come around all the time, maybe for when their cup of tea is ready or something like that. A bit of food is being cooked, they're all sharing it together. And that is what one would think is the normal, when I say normal, the everyday family, especially in the Philippines, in the provinces. But of course you have many types of families. Many of you send some horrific stories about their families, and they're not always pleasant. I recall an American who texted me one day about his family, and they were quite aggressive towards his staying there in the compound unless he paid large sums of money to the rest of the family for their support if they had their daughter in tow, if he had her daughter, their daughter in tow. And he felt he was somewhat trapped, and he was asking for my advice. My advice was pack your bags and leave, because that is, even though they say you marry the family, that clearly was one that was maybe not the best one to be a part of. You also have families that have members of families overseas, and therefore they become a little bit estranged really from the remaining family here in the Philippines. Naturally, they get on with their daily lives in America, England, Australia, New Zealand, and they are somewhat, I suppose, immune to what's going on back home. But now and again they return and have a great holiday and rekindle the relationships they have with their family. But of course some don't. Some have their family loyalties, I would say, or maybe their family preferences as to who they mix with. So you may well find that when a family member comes back from overseas, you may not actually see them. Or if you do, it will be very minor. Might be maybe a gathering for a christening or something like that, or maybe a birthday. But generally speaking, the rest of the family keep pretty much to themselves. Now, if you came with the idea that you were going to be a part of that big, happy family, think again, because in many cases you won't be. There often is a feeling of envy between other members of a family if there is a foreigner in the group, and they can't handle the reality that somehow one of the daughters has managed to capture a foreigner, and therefore the sibling rivalry comes back into play, and naturally they're there anyway as they grow up within their family here in the Philippines. But for one to have caught a big fish, so to speak, it can be an embracing situation, or it can be a sort of a standoffish relationship that remains then. At the start, everybody's all smiles and trying to bend over backwards to include you in the family. But that's because they're testing you. They're testing you whether you're going to be handing out the money to them too. Or if not handing out the money, certainly maybe involving them in some of the trips away that you do with your new girlfriend or new wife. Now, Of course, like I say, if you expected to be a part of that family, that's not always the case. You also have ones that family members who are very busy in business and they're too busy, in effect, to have a social life with other members of their family. Probably for the same reason, they feel that they may be called upon to dig deep occasionally for the rest of the family. And of course, one feels sorry for the ones that do return from overseas for a short period of time, because they're also seen as the rich foreigner, even if they're Filipino. And it's expected almost of the rest of the family that they get gifts each time they arrive home. And I'd say not a bar of chocolate, more like a house full of chocolate. And therefore, when it doesn't happen, you tend to get them disappointed, to say the least. Of course, if they're looking after somebody else's home and they're expected to be there to make sure that the home stays in one piece, you may well find when they get back from overseas that they're disappointed that things have deteriorated a little bit, and there's again animosity, but they'll never speak about it. They'll just give you the cold shoulder. And really, if you live overseas and you have a foreigner wife, you live overseas and you have your relatives living in your house, you can't really expect them to maintain the house beyond the cleanliness. When things get broke, they get broke. So therefore, it's your responsibility of the owner as an overseas Philippine resident to send some money back so that things can be fixed, so that when you do come back and you discover things that are broken, you won't discover things broken because there would have been maintenance money sent to maintain it. But often you'll find that if there's a family member who's got some money in business and these things haven't happened, there will be a feeling of disappointment and maybe even anger. So you have to look at the whole dynamic of families here. They're no different really than in the West. They can get pissed over the slightest thing, and especially if they're Filipino, and they won't necessarily confront you with it. So just be aware that if you're living with your girlfriend, soon to be your wife, in maybe the family home, and the family home gets a little bit run down, and whoever is the member of the family that now owns it, they may well expect you, the foreigner, to maintain all of the things that go wrong with the property. And of course, we all know that that's not really reasonable, even if you are living in the home rent-free. It's not always your responsibility. I mean, you rent a house in the West, things get broke, the owner fixes them. Some tenants will pay for minor repairs and things like that, but general wear and tear, where pipes get blocked, drains get blocked, if you can't fix them, then they stay blocked, because 9 times out of 10, the families that are living in those homes can't necessarily afford to fix them. And it's unreasonable for the foreign person or the foreign resident overseas whom owns the house, if he's not prepared or she's not prepared to dig in and send some money for the ongoing maintenance. They can't expect a live-in manager to dig out of their pocket. And just because they have maybe a boyfriend from overseas, why would you be asking the boyfriend to fix it? So they're just thoughts for happy families, I suppose. And these things do happen. And it's no good getting hot under the collar over it, because there'll be people who will say, come on man, any foreigner can pay for the other lack of money of the Filipina. Really? When the Filipina is living overseas and has money to easily fix it. And after all, it could even be the family home. So it falls upon the one overseas to pay for that and not expect the ones here in the Philippines to cough up with all of the maintenance on a big property. I mean, you can leave goats on your property to stop it from overgrowing, but you have to make sure those goats are fed. You have to make sure that they're fenced. And if you don't have the money to do it, really, you don't have the money to put the goats on there in the first place. So even if you have a workathon of the local family members to clear up the property now and again, that's maybe a good idea. But if there's any money required, it really does need to come from the owner, not the tenant. It's too much to ask. So, thought for the day. I'm sure there'll be comments. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you again tomorrow. Bye now.